Hey guys, it's Shane. Today I'm going to be putting my new starter on my bike, and just something I wanted to show real quick. For installing this, you have to actually file down a 10mm box wrench, unless you get something thin enough to put on there. It's a 10mm, because otherwise once you try to torque this nut down here, you'll probably end up actually making this entire thing here turn, and there's wires here that you'll torque and turn around and just mess up the insides of the starter. So as you can see, I've got my already filed down 10mm on there, and I'll be removing the cable going to the starter. So this is also a 10 on the outside nut. So you've just got two 10s here. So I'm gonna hold this, and I'm gonna back this off now. There we go. I should be able to get that off by hand now. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do there, is remove that. You see how filed down I made that to get that in there. There we go. So quick clarification here. In order to get this starter out, what we're going to be doing is just dropping the oil cooler. And I've already drained my oil out, so if there's any oil leakage, there's not going to be too much. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm actually going to remove these two mounting bolts on the oil cooler. So these are the two bolts I'm removing here. And they expose the mounting bolts for the starter. Hey guys, Overdub Shane here. The starter mounting bolts are two 10mm bolts, and you can see I use my box wrench with the 10mm ratcheting end on it to remove them. The smarter thing to do probably would have just been to fully remove the oil cooler and then remove the mounting bolts with a ratchet with the 10mm socket on it, but I like to make things difficult, as you see, so that's the way I did it. Now I guess my GoPro died after this, but after removing the two bolts from the starter, I removed the remaining 3 bolts on the oil cooler and I dropped it. The wire going to the oil pressure switch on the oil cooler is actually long enough, if you pull it out, that you can extend it all the way to the ground, so you can put the oil cooler on a piece of cardboard or something, as you see a little later in the video. And I've got the remaining 3 bolts that I did not remove circled here. So I got the oil cooler dropped here. You see it's opened up there, and there's the starter. I got a spare one of these rubber seals here, so I'll replace that while I'm in there. And at this point, the starter will basically just pull out and drop. Overdub Shane here again. Those would be famous last words. It did indeed not just pull out. I found that the easiest way to get it out was to actually grab a pair of locking pliers and lock around the bracket where the mounting bolts go through on the starter, and to wiggle it and pull on it until the starter pops out. The only thing I recommend is that if you do it yourself, wrap up the header pipe in some towels or something, so that way when the starter pops out you don't bang on your pipe. Yes, that was the sound of the starter popping out after I moved the camera out of the way and got better leverage, and there was a lot of cursing after that. Alright, so I'm going to get ready to install the new starter. I cleaned up this. It's got a clean surface. I cleaned up the inside of this hole a little bit. So all that's left to do is just put the new starter on and get the oil cooler back on. There's a seal on the starter. Put a little oil on it. There we go. There we go. I just kind of wiggle it in. There it is. I don't know what the logic was there, but it just kind of went in eventually. So I got the new starter bolted up, and just keep in mind that the mounting bolts for the starter are the shorter ones, and the mounting bolts for the oil cooler are the long bolts here. And the oil cooler bolts are all the same length there, so you won't get those mixed up. Alright, so real quick, I did clean up the threads on all of these oil cooler bolts. So, ready to remount now. Looks like we're good. Whoops, I almost made a mistake here. I need to back these two off and get the cover for the oil pressure switch back on. So this oil pressure switch has this cover that goes over it. A lot of people will just kind of forego it, but I may as well put it on. There we go. Let's see. Okay. The best angle for this. That'll be good. Methinks. Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good enough for me. Okay, so to remount, you get this bolt started, which, don't worry, won't take you half an hour. It is nice and easy. Get your 10mm on there. It's probably good. I'm not going to over torque it. There we go. Now let's get this cover back over it. And that's an installed starter. And put the oil back into it. And hopefully it cranks. Alright, so I got the oil back in it, and with everything hooked back up, I guess now we're just going to see if it actually cranks. Hey! There we go. So I'd say it's a pretty clean install there. I cleaned up the starter real good before I put it in. I opened up the old one. That's pretty toasted in there. These springs here, and these brushes can be replaced, and I replaced them in the new one I put in. Yeah, maybe I probably could have just rebuilt this one, but whatever. I'll take it apart just so you guys can see what's going on here. You got this wire here that runs into where the magnets are. I'm trashing this starter, by the way. I'm just curious what it looks like inside. Yeah, this thing is really toasted. Look at this. Yeah, I might have been able to salvage that, but the one that I put on didn't look nearly like this one does. And see, when I say you got to put the wrench on here, it's because if you don't, you can twist this out of place and mess it up. So that's what the inside looks like, if you're curious. Yeah, that looks pretty nasty there. So I might have been able to save that, but screw it. I think I paid like less than $30 for that one that I just put on. Yeah,